Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, so welcome to this presentation about the new Uttlesford design code. So we're going to go through today what a design code actually is, why we might want to make one, where it might apply, when it will be made, and who will be involved with making it. So what is a design code? Uttlesford have been lucky to, we've won funding from the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities, formerly known as Ministry for Housing, MHCLG, Local Government and Communities, something that combination. Anyway, government essentially, to produce a district-wide design code. So it's a planning document used by local people, planning officers and developers in the preparation and assessment of planning applications for new development. Overall aim being to set locally supported design standards that applicants and developers have to follow when designing new developments. So this is the National Model Design Code, which was made by the Ministry of Housing, Community and Local Government, as it was previously known. This is the government document that sets out a process that authorities and in collaboration with communities can follow to make these design codes. Quite proud that you might recognise the avenue on the front cover being held up as a national example of good design. So that's a good start for us, I think. So this is the overview of the process, starting with analysis, scoping, defining where we wanted to cover, the main issues that we want to try and control, the baseline information, so understanding of what the district is like as it exists now, what the heritage assets are, what the landscape character is, what the built form is like, public transport, where the waterways are, all these kind of things, building up a really detailed picture of what it's like already. You'll notice as well, each of these stages has consultation, with the aim being that local people through various means, community stakeholder forum, etc., can be involved in shaping and contributing to these stages. Next stage is the vision, setting out our collective vision for how we want new places to be, how we want Uttlesford to be and respond to the future. A coding plan of where the codes will apply, and then master planning, which is very much linked to site allocations as they come forward in the local plan process, and that's looking at specific sites, applying the design vision and the guidance to try and agree and collaborate on how those sites may come forward. Last stage is the more detailed coding then. So there'll be guidance for area types or site types, more general guidance that might cover the whole district, and that's the more detailed design guidance. It could cover anything from parking, open spaces, house types, materials, etc., etc. And we'll get into that detail. So the first stage, analysis. This is what the baseline information's going to look like, the kind of things we're going to look into. Street hierarchy, where the primary streets, where are the more quieter rural lanes. Transport accessibility, understanding where it's got better public transport, where's more remote, where the gaps might be. Open space provision, again, where they are, the type of accessibility, and any gaps, any communities that have got less access to open spaces. Land uses, schools, employment, etc., etc., and again, correlating these things to understand accessibility. And there's a lot more that goes into this. This is just an example. This is an example of a worksheet that could be done as part of a walking tour with local people, starting to look in more detail at certain factors that might start to define what places are like, starting to think like architects and be analytical and critical of existing places. So, for example, looking at how doors and windows might be, materials, what depth of front gardens, how back gardens are arranged, what the block types are like. Is it the kind of centre of Saffron Walden, or is it a village? All these kind of factors that will feed into that baseline analysis then. Next stage then, the vision. So This is an example from an example design code that consultants have produced. Again, just an example, but it's a vision will be a kind of high level aims and objectives linked to the local plan vision, but trying to set our kind of collective vision for how new places should be, something to test designs against to check they're meeting our vision. And it might include things, high level principles like nature recovery might be a key aim, zero carbon mobility, active travel, walking, cycling, public transport. Obviously a challenge in Uttlesford, but something we'll be potentially, prioritizing. Productive landscapes, local food growing, and enclosing ridges, setting principles for how development should respond to the landscape, all these kind of things. But this will, again, this is just an example, but this is what we'll be working through. This is looking at the master planning. Again, this is just a purely illustrative taken from the National Model Design Code. So the red line boundaries, the sites themselves will be proposed as part of the local plan process, and discussions of that kind of district-wide spatial strategy won't be part of the design code. This is more focused on how those sites might come forward in design terms. So things like the local centre, where should shops and schools be focused? Where's the best place in the site for them to be? Character types, area types. How should houses be if they're facing an open space versus how should buildings be if they're around the schools and the shops, etc. Points of access. What are the key things that we want to connect to? How do we avoid sites being severed and isolated into existing places? Again, that's linked to the primary and secondary streets. Open spaces, where's the most appropriate place for larger open spaces, amenity greens, these kind of things. So again, the kind of level of detail and the things that we'll be looking at is to be confirmed. But this is just a flavour of the kind of things we'll be trying to look at, and depending on how it meshes with the local plan processes as well, and the timings of that. Last stage then, the coding. So the National Model Design Code aims to come up with area types that could be mapped to a plan of the district, which we may or may not go down that route. But the principle of this is that the codes and the design principles should be tailored to specific conditions, existing conditions, or the type of new development. So, for example, this is obviously a more rural type of place. This is more villagey, verging on a market town. This is more suburban. This might be a larger town centre. So the principle is tailoring the guidance to the accessibility of the place, the type and scale of the place, and how it sits in the landscape. And then the more detailed guidance, again, these are all just examples, but the kind of things that we'll be trying to look at. And it's very wide ranging from the kind of block type, something more like centre of Saffron Walden. This is more suburban. How should open spaces and biodiversity corridors connect through development, trying to set down some principles for that. How should open spaces relate to homes? How should open spaces be detailed? Where should parking be? Where should refuse collection be? All these kind of principles that we'll try and work through what we think is most appropriate for these different areas of Uttlesford and try and set down some rules, essentially. So why are we making design code? So design code aims to improve the design quality of new developments in the district. The remit's much wider than the way just the buildings look. So we'll be looking at aspects considering local distinctiveness and character, sustainability, walking, cycling, landscaping, green infrastructure, net zero carbon, building materials, public open spaces. We'll be looking at the whole spectrum of what makes a place a good sustainable place to live. This is the Council's Building for Healthy Life document, which is on our website, some material consideration. And we found a few places in Uttlesford that we thought represented examples of good design for various reasons. The document also has examples of what bad constitutes bad design. These are national examples. These aren't from Uttlesford, but from experience, there are a number of places in Uttlesford that might suffer from these kind of things. So I think this will be a useful place for us to start the conversation of what we think good design is, particularly in newer developments, things that are going to come forward in the future. Yeah, and also what bad design is, what we might try and control. Where will it apply? So we've got funding for a district-wide code. The exact scope and detail of the guidance is yet to be determined, but we might agree. One school of thought is that it should focus on the new allocations coming forward. So be they settlement extensions or new communities or smaller allocations villages, whatever they may be, focusing on controlling and agreeing those design principles. And areas that might have proportionally less development might have a different type of coding applied. You can code for process or some more general principles. So this map is just used to illustrate. This is the call for sites that came forward as part of the local plan process to inform where allocations may or may not be. Just to be clear, this obviously isn't the allocation. This is the call for sites. These were put forward as potential sites, which are currently being considered. And it's just to make the point about focusing on where those allocations may come. So when will the design code be made? The deadline for the first draft is summer 2023 and end of May 2023. So the initial scoping and baseline will take starting now, running throughout the summer, and then we should be in a position to start visioning. After the summer holidays, a lot more opportunity for engaging with local people. Starting the master planning, depending on the local plan timescales, autumn of 2022, and then starting to look at the more detailed guidance and wrapping everything up winter 2022 running into 2023. So last portion now, who will be involved in making the code? So there's a dedicated team in Uttlesford District Council. I'm the Principal Urban Design Officer leading that team. But we've obviously got planning policy officers, development management colleagues, councillors are involved as well, obviously. We've got a consultant team on board. Sarah's leading that team. Very wide range of specialisms: planning, place design, architecture, community engagement, landscape, heritage, ecology, transport, etc. Essex County Council being the county or authority, collaboration with highways, minerals, waste, etc. Obviously the government, the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities, they've got a programme of support in place that we can talk to other authorities, learn from them, and obviously they're providing the funding. The Community Stakeholder Forum, of course. You know, the exact programme for how that might work is being designed with the consultants, and we'll consult you on that as well. But that should be a programme running throughout. But then expanding that as well to let local people more widely. So online workshops, in-person workshops, walking tours, visiting markets, schools, etc. Trying to be diverse as we possibly can in getting as many people involved and reaching people that might normally be difficult to reach. Statutory consultees, Natural England, Heritage, Historic England, etc. And developers and landowners, of course, being a key stakeholder. And quality review panels. So the government have got quality review panels. Essex have got quality review panels, which are a panel of design specialists who will go through the code with a fine-tooth comb and critique it and check it's aspirational and functional. So that's it. Thank you for watching. I'm going to break for questions now and discussion. if anybody has any.
Well, perhaps I could kick off.
Yeah, absolutely. Jump in.
Yeah, there was no mention of building materials in your presentation, and it seems to me that's kind of critical. Are we quite happy with concrete and other forms of high carbon, embedded carbon concrete and brick, or are we interested in new low carbon and carbon negative, building materials like hemp or CLT? Where does that fit into this process and the design code that might come out?
So, Phil, as part of the kind of baseline assessment, we'll be looking what existing materials we think characterize Uttlesford. But yeah, I totally agree. I think we should be exploring low carbon materials like you've mentioned, hempcrete, timber, natural insulation, timber framed buildings. You can even use timber foundations, but that's probably going well. Anyway, look into it. But
King's College Chapel is built on rushes. It's done very well for 500 years, built on rushes, just soaked down into the fenland. But I am not advocating that particularly. But we have a very good standing example of something that's not built on concrete, but it's just built on rushes and reeds.
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, thatch, locally sourced, sustainable material. I think.
So, at what point in the process does that get built in or included?
I think that will be in the more detailed coding process is when we'll be exploring the options.
Not part of the vision.
The
vision.
I think so. I suppose one of the vision might be low carbon, generally net zero, and part of that naturally would be lower carbon building materials. So that might be I wonder, it'd be interesting how it goes, but I wonder if just low carbon building materials would be a bit specific for a single vision point, but it might be included in a wider vision point.
It might be. Yeah, it might be included in a wider vision point around addressing climate change, and how design can do that.
Absolutely.
I mean, if Uttlesford had got us get to zero carbon by 2030 aim, then the code should be in line with that aim and actively getting us there.
Absolutely.
I agree. And just to jump in there, obviously there'll be a number of different types of development that will be coming forward in the district through the local plan, and setting out early that sort of vision for not just sort of low carbon for the built environment, but the sort of nature of recovery networks that Jack mentioned earlier, and how the wildlife connectivity of the areas that aren't going to be built on can be enhanced and connected. But setting out then aspirations for even the highest level of the code, of the methods at which and the expectations of developments to go forward to meet those principles. I think whilst understanding that developments of hundreds of homes are likely to object on hemp and other building materials across the piece, and I think it's important to early understand what the challenges of development in Uttlesford are, from working with obviously officers and what the issues of the sort of some of the developments coming forward and local people and stakeholders as well, and seeking to find what the best mechanisms through the coding are to improve the quality of development that comes forward. And some of that may be elements of improving the how those developments may go forward to achieving that sort of low carbon and net zero approach and contributing to that, whilst from sort of raising the design quality, but also having a sort of eye. And one of the things that MHC DLUC, as they're now called, MHCLG, will be keen to understand through this process is the sort of viability of delivering those aspirations as well.
Sorry, go on, Frank.
Okay, thank you. What do you see as the challenges of building in Uttlesford then? It's a bit of an unusual district, isn't it? It's got some unique features, I think, compared with many other in the country.
Main challenges, yeah. So I suppose, I mean, the main one that sticks out for me is public transport accessibility and opportunities for that. opportunities for active travel, walking and cycling is a big challenge. But obviously the kind of landscape character, heritage character, obviously being very, very special, and how new development might protect and enhance that. I think we're all aware of some examples that might have come forward in the past in Uttlesford and nationally that haven't achieved that. So we'll be understanding, you know, those issues.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'd agree with everything you said there, Jack, but I'd maybe take it up a level. A lot of those issues are linked, I think, to the rural nature of the district. It's very low density population. It's kind of beautiful towns and villages and rolling hills and landscape and what have you. May give it a lot of challenges with infrastructure and the like. And yeah, so I agree with everything you're saying, but just maybe take it up a level. Thank you.
Good idea.
I think Stuart's.
Yeah, just following up from what Edward was saying, I think materials of the construction should be taken into account at a fairly early stage. Firstly, also that one needs to look at maintenance of the properties when they've been built, because they don't want to be high maintenance, they need to be low maintenance. And the other thing is that if you take, for instance, the housing built, semis around the London suburbs built in the 20s and 30s, they're still there. And I think we should look at, we are designing buildings which are going to last for at least 100 years as well, because I don't think we want to be putting up housing and having to replace them in 50, 70 years' time. I think they should be designed to have a long life.
Absolutely, totally agree. And maintenance is a section in the National Model Design Code, and it's definitely something that will be explored and considered when when we're looking at building materials. I mean, just linking the building materials to lower embodied carbon as well. I think because some standards will be proposed, obviously, as part of the local plan, and part of the design code will be marrying up how those standards might be met, but designing places that are specific to Uttlesford as well. And I mean, this might be a bit specific, but I think there's a brilliant opportunity for, I mean, render, I think is something that's prevalent in Uttlesford, obviously, along with other materials, and a lime render is very low carbon on a timber frame with natural insulation, and straight away you're getting to a building that's reflective of sunlight, very low carbon. If it's a two-story semi or detached with PVs on, you're getting a lot of your, or almost all of your energy from. So yeah, I think it's getting into more detail of marrying up the net zero and design, and hope that that's one of the main aims of the code, is all these different aspirations, bringing them together. How can they inform one another? How can they have a synergy? That kind of thing.
Yeah, thank you.
Are there opportunities for things like district heating? I'm recently back from Norway, the top of Norway, where, of course, any new settlement has one power station providing all the hot water and services to the entire community. And if we're looking at introducing whole new communities and not just a few, bits of infill and things like that, is that something you consider? It's a very, ecologically sensible way to go, should we say?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm not an expert on this, which is why I've got our consultant team to advise, but my understanding is it's a lot more viable and effective the larger the newer community. So exactly as you've just said, Frank, but I think absolutely that's exactly what we're going to want to be exploring.
And actually, following up from Frank's point, I mean, it seems to me, community energy projects should be also at the heart of the design, especially when I kind of think of playing fields, when they bung in a football field or a green space and they've got the bulldozers in, just get ground source heat pumps in. I mean, you could actually heat the whole settlement around a football pitch with a shared community ground source heat pump. And I know, especially in rural parts where they're heavily dependent on oil, and not only is oil very expensive, and it may have come from Russia, which is even worse, but gets stolen regularly. And you know, it's just one of those bugbears of living in a community that isn't on the gas grid and is dependent on oil, thinking, well, it would be great if the community could get together with a ground source heat pump system and get that energy from under the ground in a communal way. So I think community energy, I'd really agree with Frank that could be at the heart of our design process. But it's one of those things that probably has to be in there at an early stage in the design process. It can't be an add-on afterwards.
Exactly, and hopefully that's the synergy this project can have if depending on how far we get with the master planning. You know, if you're planning for a playing field, you're also planning for community energy, and you're doing that with the community, and you're making you're bringing the people together as well. That's hopefully when it's working at its absolute best. So that'd be brilliant.
This is one of the points we were trying to make in the earlier community forum, stakeholder forum meetings. Plan for infrastructure. Individual planning applications don't do that because they're small enough and they don't need to. And that surely was one of the issues with the previous local plan. You know, let's have a new, shall we say, town, but we'll only build the transport infrastructure once it's established. And that's crazy. You build it first, get in the right sequence, because otherwise the infrastructure will never appear because no one can afford it. You've got to invest up front with things like that, and you know, the ground source heat pumps, etc. That it's going to cost money, but it's worth doing, and you do it early.
And I suppose that's where and Stephen or Sarah might step in to correct me here, but I suppose that's where the overlap with the local plan, looking at that overall infrastructure, and then the engaging with local people to ask in more detail about what do you need in your, you know, if this development was to come forward, how could it benefit you? What infrastructure do you need? And then starting to look where the best place for that would be as part of the design code process.
So let me clarify then, in terms of the location of development, is that out of scope of the design code, or is there an overlap between design code and the local plan that locates where things are going to be? Where's the
local plan makes the decision as to where development is located. Right. The design code is then about how the development is designed.
Okay, so therefore it's out of scope of what we're doing here.
Yes.
Okay.
So so I think the local plan obviously will guide, you know, infrastructure that's required for, you know, the housing growth that will be planned for. But the design code will then put sort of more detail on how that should be delivered, the expectations of developments, a bit more detail. So the local plan may set carbon targets, for example, and, you know, aspirations for heat networks or other elements, but the design coding will put in a bit more detail around how those could or may be delivered, including sort of mandatory requirements for how developments should contribute to that, including, you know, understanding obviously many of those will be at very early stages, but it will include steps and process coding that will indicate the steps that must be followed in order to, you know, what's expected up to an outline planning application, what's expected up to a reserve matters application, and the sort of elements that new communities and sort of even down to sort of infill developments, smaller developments that may come forward will go towards meeting those requirements.
So if there's no more questions, I could wrap. I was just going to talk about the walking tours. I could wrap up if people are happy to move on. Great. Okay. So these would be essentially walking tours. And I'll tell you, if I share screen again, and then I'll just get that. Just give me 1 second. So these kind of workshops, the idea being that we'd go around in person, get to know each other a bit better, start looking in more detail at the places, and yeah, as I said, with this critical and analytical eye, looking at specific things that overall combine to give a place their feel, and documenting them, and then feeding that into the baseline analysis. And it might be through clipboards and paper, but we're also looking at kind of digital formats as well, potentially certain online maps that you can place comments on a map. Also kind of preferences as well, so picking out elements that we definitely don't like, we don't want to repeat, picking out elements that we like, kind of historic character maybe, but also potentially most usefully would be new developments that have come forward that we like, because they're obviously more likely to be in line with current standards, current viability, current needs, and those kind of things. So so in terms of the walking tours, and I'm just going to stop sharing screen, because I've planned to do some online training next week, Wednesday, 20th of July, the evening, and then Saturday morning, run a walking tour. Now, I'm aware that there's not many people that will be able to make that because it's short notice. So the idea being that it's a bit of a soft start to get going before the summer holidays, get people up to speed, share a video, with the idea being that there'll be obviously an opportunity for anyone that wants to get involved over the course of the program, and that they'd gather speed over the summer and over the holidays. So that's the idea of running the first ones. I think I've got 2 attendees so far for Saturday 23rd. I'm very happy to do that. Just let me know if you are or not. I'm happy either way, but there obviously will be opportunities to do that again. And I wanted to decide this meeting the location of that first tour, and if Hayley is ready. Sorry, I didn't give you much notice, Hayley. There's some suggestions there if you just want to try and vote for those. I'll give you a few minutes. And probably only if Frank, Edward and Stuart vote, please.
I assumed as much.
Yes. Probably stating the obvious there.
Can you remind us of the dates you were looking at? Because I think you said Wednesday the 25th, and then the following Saturday, which is only the 23rd.
Wednesday the 20th evening for the training, but that will be a virtual training. It'll be a video that will be shared. So
I see. So that's not a working tour on that Wednesday.
No,
it's not. Right. So we're talking about the Saturday the 23rd.
The morning. Yeah.
At what time?
I can probably get to Saffron Walden for the centre of Saffron Walden for about 10ish. But if that's too late, I can do earlier.
Okay. No,
but it's not just Saffron Walden, Jack. It's Great Dunmore, Stansted, Mount Fitchett as well.
Well, we've got 100% of votes for Saffron Walden at the moment.
Oh, okay. You can see the numbers. I can't.
but good point, Stephen. Yeah.
Well, yeah, a morning one would be pretty good for me because I've got something in the afternoon or something.
Great. Okay.
100% Saffron Walden. Hey, that's wonderful.
Yeah. Can everyone see the poll results? Yeah. Great. Yeah. Okay.
Someone's got some nice music on.
Sorry about that.
It's all right. But yeah, I think it's a good place to start because there's such a variety, obviously. You know, you've got that tight medieval core and then the gradation right out. So
yeah,
that'd be good.
And are we looking at a couple of hours, presumably?
I think so, given the potential heat. And there'll be a lot of stopping and
quite a lot of walking to do.
Yeah. So
okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Brilliant. Okay. I mentioned in my first email that there was going to be a survey that would follow on from this meeting. I think it's probably best to postpone that until I've had a conversation with our consultants, because they're a lot more adept at what we'd actually be trying to achieve with that. So that was only very short.
Well, Jack, one question from me is how do our inputs, our contributions get kind of recorded? When we had our kind of stakeholder meetings, we said stuff at the meetings, but actually, unless we then repeated it in writing and fed it into the online kind of thing, it didn't get anywhere, that it got lost in the ether. So do we need to repeat what we say and feed it into an online thing that any member of the public can also feed into? Is that how it works, or how is it recorded?
To be honest, it's a bit to be confirmed at the moment, because the previous ones, you know, it was captured in the issues and options representations, but this will be more of an ongoing. There'll hopefully be a dedicated website. Sarah might have a more accurate answer.
Yes, I will, and obviously Soundings will provide more detail once they once we get a bit further into the process. But the intention is that a specific app and website will be developed. We have consultants who'll be creating that. Obviously, Jack is providing us background information, which includes the sort of representations and information that's been made before. So we will, as a team, be going through that as well. But throughout the process, there'll be different themed workshops and different topics, in-person sessions as well, with obviously this, yourselves or virtual, but also the community. And I think it'd be great, obviously, to feed into all of those. So if there's noticing a particular interest on these calls on kind of built form and materials and climate change and sustainability, those are the kind of topics that will be being covered throughout the process, so that they can feed into understanding really what local people would like to see as development comes forward. So I'd encourage you to engage throughout the process, even if you've sort of previously written.
So that means in the end, loading up the app, getting into the app and tapping away and getting it into some sort of written form.
There will be alternative methods. So there'll be, so you don't specifically need to use the website. We'll be providing forms that can be filled in the same way so there'll be options to make it accessible for all. Okay. So including obviously paper forms, there'll be on the ground sort of pop-ups, at, events and things. And obviously through this group, I think Jack and team have already established methods of communication, but the reasons for sort of developing apps and things that are mobile friendly as well is to reach the sort of widest range of people. Sort of younger people are always on their phones. So it's trying to reach a full spectrum of the community.
Thank you.
I'll be able to capture everything that we've discussed tonight as well. Maybe it's part of an FAQs, rolling FAQs that forms part of the website or something such as that. But yeah, certainly aiming to capture everything and feed it in.
And it's having worked through this sort of Pathfinder process once, the previous round of Pathfinders, it's a really important part of MHCLG's reporting. And I'm going to keep calling them MHCLG because that's what they were when
so
I did the last. DLUC, as they are now called. It's a really important part of their testing and the work that they're doing to see how the success of these Pathfinders are working. So that'll be a really important part of the sort of reports and presentation that get fed back to them, so it will be documented throughout the process.
Absolutely. Yes, it's a bit of a soft start today, but hopefully it's going to be an exponential kind of reach out, really, to as many people as we can.
The 23rd, Saturday 23rd meeting, what time? Do we say 10 o'clock? Sorry, I probably missed that because of my doorbell.
Don't worry. I mean, if 10 o'clock suits, that suits me.
Yeah, it suits me. Yeah,
it's reasonably civilized.
Where do we meet?
I need to plan the tour.
Okay, well, you'll let us know. You'll let us know. Okay.
Yeah.
Right, fine.
I'll let you know. But it will end in a pub or a cafe though, as these things always should. So
very good. Excellent.
Yep.
Okay.
Great. I mean that's it from me. Just so keep an eye on the email. I'll be in touch. We'll be in touch. And thank you very much indeed for coming. Really appreciate it.
Thank
Great.
you, Jack,
Thank you.
and your team.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks for
yeah,
coming.
interested to see how it goes. Thank you.
Brilliant.
Right.
Thank you very much.
Nice to meet you. Bye.
Bye,
Bye.
Jack. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.